In CSS, there are three main ways you can use color. Before we jump into those three ways, let's create a few elements that we can apply colors to. I've already created an HTML page called colors.html and given it the emit.html5 boilerplate, and I've linked it to the CSS file we'll be using. So let's get the elements going. First, we'll go ahead and create a container element. Let's call it color container. That'll work. And let's create a header. So we'll create an h1 tag. Now, it doesn't matter what you call the container element there, just as long as you give it a name that you can reference from CSS. Let's also create an h2 tag here. We'll say using colors with CSS. Let's give this some spacing. All right, now let's jump in and do some styling. Let's save this and then jump over into colors.css. And actually, so we can see our CSS and our HTML side by side, let's split the window and we'll open up CSS on the right and HTML on the left. Okay, let's style our color container. And we'll do that referencing color container with the hashtag in front like that. And let's give it a background color. And to give it a background color, we use the background color tag. Let's start out by using a color name, and we'll start out with light coral, which is a color I just happen to like. And let's see how that looks really quick. So let's save and refresh. There we go. We have our light coral, and if I go over here and delete the color that I have here, you'll notice that VS Code gives us a list of other colors that match whatever we type in here. So we can choose any of these light colors, or if we type in something else, say dark, then we get a list of the dark colors. Or you can use one of the common ones like light gray or white. Let's try and see what red looks like. Let's type in red and refresh and see how that looks. Okay, yeah. Let's go back to the color we had. Let's go back to light coral, save and refresh. All right, so that is how we use color names within CSS. The next way to color elements is by using hex codes. So let's give that a try. Let's color our h1 element here, and let's use the color property to color in the text here. And we'll do that using a hex code. Hex codes start with a hashtag or a pound sign, and then they're followed by 6 characters, with 2 standing for the color red, 2 standing for the color green, and 2 standing for the color blue. There's a link in the description to explain how this works, but for our purposes here, let's just use the black hex code. And the black hex code is done just using all zeros. So let's do 000000. Now, a cool thing with VS Code is that I can just hover over this color here, and it gives me a color picker window here. And over here, I can select the main color, and then on the left, I can select the variation on that color, or the shade. So let's do that now. Let's select a color that's like red, but a little bit darker. Yeah. Here we go. And let's save that and see how it looks. That's great. So as you can see here, you can just use a whole bunch of different colors. And that's really the power of using something like hex codes over named codes, since there are a limited number of named codes, but you can represent virtually any color in the rainbow spectrum with a hex code. So that covers hex codes. Now the third way of using color in CSS is by using Rgb codes. So let's color our h2 element here by using another color tag, and let's give it the Rgb. Let's give it an Rgb property, and Rgb takes 3 parameters and is wrapped in parentheses, and each of the 3 parameters goes from 0 to 255, 0 being black and 255 in each respectively being that color, 255 being red, 255 being green, and 255 being blue. Now I've given 255 to each here, and this will come out to white since it's all the colors. So let's save that and see how it looks. There we go. All right. And again, if we highlight over the RGB value here, VS Code will give us a color picker and let us pick any color we want, and it will fill in the RGB value for us. We're going to actually stick with the white color here before we move on. So let's save that. So that covers the basic 3 ways to use colors in CSS. You can, of course, do some additional things like using Rgba if we want to add some transparency, the A there standing for alpha. In fact, let's try something out with Rgba. Let's add another element here, and we will give it an alpha color. We'll type in, this is alpha, and let's reference H3, and let's give it a color, and we'll give it an Rgba property. Note that it's the same as the Rgb property here, but it has an additional value of alpha that lets us determine the transparency of the color. In this case, let's start out with black. So we'll give it 0, 0, 0, and let's give it a full alpha of 1. And we'll use VS Code to set our transparency here. So notice there's a slider that lets us choose the transparency. And we can choose all the other values from RGB. All right, so let's save that and see how that looks. We'll give this a setting of 351. Save it, refresh, and there you go. So this is set to black, but since we have given it an alpha value, some of the color from the background is bleeding through. And that's something you can use basically anywhere you can use color. You can even layer different colors on top of each other using alpha because they have different transparencies. Let's actually try that. Let's make a div. Let's call it subcontainer. Let's wrap it around this is alpha or H3 tag. And let's style it. So let's give it its own color here, or its own background color. And let's set it to the same value we have here, and then we'll change it. All right, let's see what happens when we select a color. Let's try a blue. Yeah, let's select blue here, give it an alpha, let's save it, and see how that looks. All right, and notice how it's not fully blue, but that some of the red is bleeding through. And if we change that to something like green, we can see how that affects it. Yeah, let's give it a different alpha value here. Let's select a green. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, so you can see how the red bleeds through there. I actually think a red here would look better. So let's try that and see how that looks. Let's save it. There we go. So yeah, you can really start to see how layering colors can be really powerful. But yeah, this really covers what you can do with colors in CSS, at least on a basic level. Now, this just scratches the surface for the ways you can apply colors to your elements. There are things such as gradients and drop shadows you can use, and we'll cover those in the future. But for now, this about covers it for CSS colors.